Hi, I'm Wes Clark Jr. I guess I wanted to start off and kind of tell you why what happened last year happened. I got a call in the fall from a tribal elder out at Standing Rock after they just had a bunch of their women and children attacked by dogs. And people rounded up with hoods put on their heads and zip tied and kept in kennels. And all this was done by private military companies for the benefit of the Dakota Access Pipeline. I got periodic updates again and again from Phyllis as the fall went on. And at each update, the situation was worse. So one week you say, well, they say the sheriff just ordered 150 body bags, and you have to understand, Standing Rock was right around where the Battle of Little Bighorn happened. If you remember General Custer from the 7th Cavalry, he rode in there to force the Indians onto reservation and got wiped out. And then years later, the 7th Cavalry came back and massacred hundreds of women and children at Wounded Knee to keep them on the reservation. And since then, they've had more and more land taken every year. So the government says, oh, this is worthless land, go live on this. And then 20 years later, we found something that's worth money underneath your land, so now you need to move again. They were kicked off their farmland when the government decided we needed to sell power through a dam to people after World War II, and it just continues and continues and continues. And, you know, background on me, I grew up in the military, and I was in the military, and I did that mainly because I believed in the country. I grew up during the Cold War, when it seemed, to me at least, the lines were pretty clear on what was what. And that what made the United States unique was that we had a constitution that we respected, that life would continually be getting better for people and more fair. And then we approached this moment last fall where I decided, well, no one's going to help me with Standing Rock. I talked to every journalist I could find and politicians and lawyers, and everyone said, how am I going to get paid? So I put a call out for veterans to join me, and we had about 15 people who were going to go. And then I went to New York, and I went to Hillary Clinton's victory party after the election. And at that moment, in that room with the most powerful people in the Democratic Party in America, it felt like the hand of God came down and broke everyone's spirits. The next day, I had friends in New York, because I'm an environmentalist. I happen to believe in science and that we need to do something to save our planet. And I had friends in the environmental movement call me and really, like, genuinely frightened. Like, Trump is a Nazi, I should take my stuff offline, I need to just clear my feed so I can't be held liable for anything. And I saw this as well when I came back to Los Angeles. I mean, the flight back from LA to New York the day after the election was also felt biblical. It was like everybody just depressed. And so I saw all my friends worried and scared, and I got plenty of death threats. I used to work with a show called The Young Turks, and you get a lot of death threats from right-wing people. And I thought, I can't have people be scared like this. What is the future for our country if we fear all the time? And, you know, the people who were in power got in power aside from help from another country. They got into power through people's fears by saying, oh, it's a very small pie and no one's really going to get a piece. But that guy's going to steal it, so let's all get together and get on that guy's case. And that's kind of how the society's been functioning. For years, really since 9/11, this country has acted terrified of things it shouldn't be terrified about. Our grandparents and great-grandparents who fought in other world wars would shake their heads and wonder what on earth we'd become. That we're frightened that 19 men with box cutters killed people, that's enough to change our democracy? To get rid of freedom of the press, to invade countries that had nothing to do with us, that's worthwhile. It's worthwhile for oil that we should take these indigenous people at Standing Rock and strip them of their rights and strip them of their land because they're Indian. I just couldn't sit with that. So I came home and I wrote an operations order, which is what you do when you're an Army officer and you're going to do an operation. And I named the government of North Dakota and the police and the mercenary companies working with them as our enemies. And we used that. We had an article like a week later, and suddenly we went from having 15 of us going to 1,000. And 2 days later, we had 2,000. And we closed it out at 2,100 because we didn't think we'd have enough room. And then 5,000 people showed up this week last year. And we got 5,000 veterans to come out there. During a work week, 3 weeks before Christmas, right as a blizzard was about to hit, and the only thing any of us expected was that we would be beaten by the police and probably jailed. When you go up against an oil company is the richest, most powerful thing on the planet. They own our government, they own our law enforcement, they own their own private companies. Out of that 5,000, we had 150 private military contractors which were paid to go undercover and create havoc within our group. We had them in our staff. I got death threats. I had somebody try and get me into an enclosed space with what looked like an IED while I was out there. I was told I'd be murdered numerous times. I mean, none of that happened. But the way they get you is they get you through fear. So before I went out, I was told, well, you may not come back. So I did a will, and you know, I prepared myself that I could spend 10 or 20 years in jail. And you're like, God, you could spend 20 or 20 years in jail for that? Well, think about it. There's like 60 people in Washington, D.C. right now, and they're facing 60 years in jail for 3 broken windows during the inauguration. So if you think that somehow there's justice in this country, there isn't. And the reason there isn't is because that many people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to go to jail. They're afraid to lose their job. They're afraid to get hurt. Unless that changes among a vast majority of people, your freedoms will not exist in a very short amount of time. We live in a world where the President of the United States has decided to wage a war on the rule of law. This rule of law is what protects our rights. It's what protects our environment, it's what's protected our economy, and it's what's allowed our children to have a better future generation after generation. But instead what we hear is that we have to worry about war with North Korea, that we have to worry about terrorists coming to destroy us, that we have to worry about all these things that are not the cause of the problem. Because the cause of the problem is fear. It's what you'll learn reading almost any novel, looking at any religion, looking at times in history when the bad triumphs. The bad triumphs because people are scared. And all I can tell you is what we're facing now, unless people get some courage, and unless people stand up and be recognized and counted and risk things, you will lose it all. Because the reality is not just that you will lose your political rights, but you will probably lose your very lives, since it's a government that doesn't understand science, that continues to pump more carbon into the atmosphere, that picks fights and threatens nations with nuclear war. This is all designed to scare you. So my only thing that I ask, other than that you give generously to the Veterans Organization here tonight for Iraq and Afghan veterans, is that you understand that hope and love is always stronger than hate and fear. Always. Don't ever let them tell you otherwise. Very few people are willing to give their life for hate and fear. I'm willing to give my life for hope and love, and I hope you are too. Thank you.